Syracuse Football has one of the best tight end rooms in the country.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here in the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, Syracuse Football has one of the best tight end rooms in the country. That's right. Not just in the ACC, in the country. Syracuse Football tight end room. And when you look at the Orange's roster for next season, when you look at their roster, there are a lot of improvements. I think this is one of the best Syracuse rosters on paper in a long time. Maybe at least since 2018 when they won 10 games. And I know I have them winning about 7-8 games next season, but still on paper, they are better than some of the other teams in years past. Okay? But when you look at all of the position groups, the one that is super duper elite, not just good for the ACC or good for Syracuse compared to years past, but like super duper elite, it's the Orange tight end room led by Oronde Gadsden, followed by Dan Villari, and three other tight ends, one of which is a veteran who's been here for 4 seasons, and then 2 high school prospects with a ton of potential. So when you look at this Syracuse Football tight end room, it is one of the best in the country, and we're going to go over it on today's show. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Let's start off with talking about the best of the bunch, because I rattled off a ton of names there. Oronde Gadsden, the leader of the tight end group. He is 6'5", 220 pounds. He's a tight end or a wide receiver. He can play both. He is from Florida. He's a redshirt junior with 2 years of eligibility left. He has 2 years. That's great, right? Well, it's a good problem, kind of similar to Donnie Freeman and how I think he's going to be a one-and-done player at Syracuse because he is that good. Oronde Gadsden has 2 years of eligibility. I don't think he's going to use that second year because I believe that after next season, he's going to be a hot NFL draft prospect. If you look at the mock drafts right now, I've seen a lot of day 2. So that means either a round 2 or round 3 player in Oronde Gadsden. So I imagine that this is going to be his final year on the hill, and then he's going to take his talents to the NFL. And who knows? Maybe if he has a monster year, perhaps put on a little bit more weight so he can really handle being an NFL tight end. Maybe he sneaks his way into being a day 1 pick, which means first round NFL draft. He was the only Syracuse player, by the way, that made the top 100 on the new NCAA video game. You could take that for what it's worth, but the video game makers have Oronde Gadsden as a top 100 player. I believe he came inside the top 70. Oronde Gadsden, one of the elite players in the country who leads off Syracuse Football's elite tight end room. Now, when looking at expectations for Oronde Gadsden, because what are the expectations for him? He had nearly 1,000 yards just a couple years ago. Should we expect the same production? Well, it's tricky because Jeff Nixon is a new offensive coordinator at Syracuse, and he has never had a tight end that is this good as Oronde Gadsden, and that includes the NFL talent that he has worked with. Okay? When he has been a tight ends coach, and I'm only counting when he has been either a tight ends coach or an offensive coordinator / assistant. I'm not counting when he was at teams who had great tight ends, but he would be like a running backs coach. Okay? He has been a tight ends coach once, and that was in 2016 with the San Francisco 49ers. Now, the 49ers that season were awful. They went 2-14. But Jeff Nixon, he coached Garrett Selleck, who is not a big name by any means. I'm not expecting many of you guys to know who Garrett Selleck is, but Garrett Selleck had 29 catches for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. And oh, by the way, that was his career high season. So under Jeff Nixon, Garrett Selleck, not a well-known tight end, had his career best year. Oronde Gadsden, I think, is going to be the best tight end that Jeff Nixon has ever had to work with. I truly do. He's probably better than Garrett Selleck, or at least has a much higher potential than Garrett Selleck had. Nixon was the offensive coordinator at Baylor from 2017 to 2019. He never really had an elite tight end, or at least one that was even drafted in his time there. He was an offensive assistant in Carolina with the Panthers in 2021 and 2022. And the best tight end he worked with is Jamie Tremble. Again, not a household name. He was a third-round NFL draft pick, but not a household name. The other one he worked with was Ian Thomas. So he has never really been given a tight end this talented like Oronde Gadsden. So it's hard to say, well, Jeff Nixon has had so much success with tight ends. Well, he hasn't really been given a tight end quite like Oronde Gadsden. Like I said, in 2022, Gadsden had nearly 1,000 yards. He was a Blitnikoff Award watch list member. That means best receiver in the country, but he's not even really a receiver. He's a tight end or a receiver. He's a hybrid, okay? He's a weapon. He's a very, very good pass catcher. In fact, if you're looking at the one thing that he probably needs to improve on, it's the run blocking. And by that, he needs to put on a little bit more weight to be able to handle the NFL workload. But from a college perspective and catching the football, there aren't many players in the country that are as good as Oronde Gadsden. He is definitely the best player on Syracuse football's roster right now. And he's the best option, the best weapon in Syracuse's arsenal. And there's a lot of names out there, including the one that we're going to get to soon in Dan Villari. It is Oronde Gadsden. He is the best player on this team, and he leads this tight end position group, which is one of the best in the country. Will he have 1,000 yards? Will he become the first Syracuse tight end to have 1,000 yards? Will he break his record? It's certainly possible. I'll go over it more on Friday with Poll Friday. The over-under amount of receiving yards, 1,050 is what I have for him. I think right now, mostly early returns are saying over. My concerns are injuries, right? Last year, he got hurt. He had to have a couple surgeries from that. So is he going to be fully recovered from it? Even if he is fully recovered from injury and let's say plays all the games, there are a lot of mouths to feed on Syracuse's offense. So even though he is the number one option, because there are a lot of mouths to feed, he might not get the ball enough to hit 1,000 yards and break his record, which is currently 969. That is the most a Syracuse football tight end has ever gotten in a season. 969 set by Oronde Gadsden a couple years ago. Maybe he can break it. Maybe he won't. I'll touch on it more on Poll Friday. So overall, Oronde Gadsden leads the tight end position group, which is one of the best in the country. Now coming up, the Swiss Army knife of the team, Dan Villari. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. A free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the streaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on today's show, we are going over the tight end room of Syracuse football and why I believe it is one of the best position groups in the country. And by that, I mean their tight end room is elite, super duper elite, best on the team, best in the ACC, one of the best in the country. We went over Oronde Gadsden, who himself alone is one of the best tight end prospects for the next NFL draft, one of the best tight ends in the country. Now we're going to go over Dan Villari, who might just be one of the best backup tight ends in the country, because let's be honest, he's capable of being a starter. He can easily be a starter in a power conference, and it wouldn't even really be considered a weakness, to be honest with you. If Dan Villari was essentially any team outside of, maybe like a Georgia or something like that, for any other team, really, he would be a capable, fine starter, and you wouldn't really consider it a weakness. Dan Villari is 6'4", 235 pounds. He's a tight end from New York. He is a redshirt junior with 2 years of eligibility left. I do believe that he would use that second year he has left of eligibility, because I don't know if he's quite an NFL draft prospect yet. Maybe he can become one day, but at least as of right now, on July 15th, at the time of this recording, don't believe that Dan Villari is an NFL prospect just yet. He can still get there, but maybe he might need that second year to do it. He is a converted quarterback. He did so when he went to Michigan, and then he transferred to Syracuse in 2022, and that's when he converted from quarterback to tight end. His role for next season, he is the Swiss Army knife of the offense. Last year, Dan Villari completed what is known as the offensive hat trick. I just made it up. He completed the hat trick. He had a receiving touchdown, he had a rushing touchdown, and he had a passing touchdown all in the same season. This is a guy who can start at quarterback. He won ACC running back of the week, and he can also catch passes, and he can block. The way to think of him, if you are a new viewer and you've never tuned into or you've never seen Dan Villari play before, and that's okay, because you'll see him next season, think of Taysom Hill from the New Orleans Saints. That is essentially the prototype that Dan Villari is following in. Okay, there's only one Taysom Hill. There's only one, but the miniature version, so to speak, the miniature one, the college version, is Dan Villari. And what a luxury that is, that he is the backup tight end, the backup behind Oronde Gadsden. That's why I truly believe that this is one of the best tight end units in the country. Okay, because you have Oronde Gadsden, who's elite. He's elite. NFL draft prospect, day 2, day 3, maybe even day 1 if he has a big season. Right? Nearly 1,000 yards a couple years ago. If he just stays healthy, he could easily hit 1,000 yards this season and break his own record, right? The backup is Dan Villari. Dan Villari, once again, would be a capable starter for most power conferences, and most schools in those conferences. He would be a capable starter. His role is going to be dependent week in and week out, right? He is the Swiss Army knife. He can do a lot of different things. But having said that, his role won't be necessarily consistent, because there are a lot of mouths to feed, obviously. And last year, as players started getting hurt and Derek Schrader's shoulder started acting up on him, that's when Dan Villari really started seizing control of the offense and really becoming a prominent player within the offense. So if Kyle McCord is healthy, and hopefully he is healthy, I think he could be very effective in the backfield with Kyle McCord, and he can honestly trick defenses into snapping it to Dan Villari, right? You can also run Dan Villari in the Wildcat. You can put him pretty much everywhere. If for some reason Kyle McCord goes down, then maybe if it's for a game or two, you can have Villari in as the backup quarterback and just run a Wildcat type offense, because I'm not really confident in the Syracuse backup quarterbacks right now. Basically, when the starting quarterback is healthy, I don't know if Villari will be used as much, but if there's any sort of limitations with anyone on the offense, that it definitely includes Kyle McCord, then that's when Villari can really kind of be that next person in. He can almost fill in for anyone. That's essentially what Dan Villari can do. What Taysom Hill is in New Orleans. When Derek Carr is healthy, or any starting quarterback is healthy for them, Taysom Hill, he maybe sees the field a few times a game, right? He'll get 10, 20 snaps, right? But when their starting quarterback is not healthy, Taysom Hill sometimes fills in, or at the very least, they start using him a lot more within the offense because they're not as confident in the backup quarterback. Similar thing with Dan Villari. Once again, a college version of Taysom Hill. That is what Dan Villari is. I think Dan Villari is a good football player. I think he is. His role will just fluctuate week in and week out. He'll have some weeks where he'll play 75 to 90% of the snaps, and he'll probably have other weeks where he's playing 20% of the snaps. It's just how it is. But that is an incredible luxury to have as a backup tight end who is capable of doing so many different things for this Syracuse offense. And why ultimately I believe this Syracuse tight end room, I would stack it up with pretty much any other team in the country. I truly would. You got Oronde Gadsden, you got Dan Villari, we're going to get to Max Mang coming up, and then you got two high school prospects, Elijah Washington, Jamie Tremble. There's a lot of depth to it, a lot of size to it. This Syracuse tight end room has me pumped for next season. Now, coming up, we're going to get to those other 2024 Syracuse football tight ends. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on today's show, we are going over one of the premier position groups in the country, the Syracuse football tight end room. I would stack it up with pretty much any tight end group in the NCAA. Let's get to Max Mang because we talked about Oronde Gadsden. We talked about Dan Villari. Now let's get to Max Mang. He is 6'7", 265 pounds. He's a senior from Germany. He only has this year of eligibility left. In his career, he has only caught 8 passes, but he has played in 49 games. He's mostly been used as a blocking tight end and on special teams. I imagine for next season, it's going to be a similar role. He is going to see the field in running situations, so you need someone who can really run block well, and will also see the field for special teams plays. Right? That's his role because he's not going to leap Oronde Gadsden in the depth chart. He's not going to leap Dan Villari on the depth chart. Those guys are just better than Max Mang, but that's okay. Max Mang will still have a role on the offense next season as a primary blocking tight end. And God forbid any of those other two get hurt, then Max Mang would immediately start to have more of a receiving role within the offense for next year. But it wouldn't surprise me if he only had 5 to 10 catches next season. That's Max Mang for you. Now, these next two players are both high school prospects. Let's get to Jamie Tremble, 6'4", 210 pounds from Georgia. He is a true freshman this season, obviously. A 4-star recruit, pretty much across the board. The only service that doesn't have him as a 4-star is On3. On3 has him as a very high-end 3-star recruit. So it's a bummer because I can't say that Jamie Tremble is a consensus 4-star recruit. He's almost a consensus 4-star recruit. But at the very least, he is one of the best recruits in Syracuse football's 2024 class. One of the best. You can make an argument that he is the best in Syracuse's 2024 class. Now, here's the thing. He originally committed to Syracuse last June. So take it back to June 2023. It was a big-time commitment by Dino Babers to get Jamie Tremble. But then afterwards, he's from Georgia. He visited Georgia. He visited Georgia Tech in the months after as well. So even though he was committed to Syracuse, he did take a couple of visits. But lo and behold, Fran Brown was able to keep him. He kept him, which is just as important as landing the commitment, right? Because right now, commitments for 2025, 26, 27, whatever year, for 2025, 2026, those commitments are only verbal. Nobody can sign yet. And so when Jamie Tremble committed in 2023, he verbally committed, but he hadn't yet signed with Syracuse, so he was able to take those visits, and he did. Luckily, Fran Brown was able to keep him Now, this year for Jamie Tremble, I know there's a lot of hype with him because he is a big-time recruit. He's top 200 in 24/7 Sports, a top 200 player. So 24/7 Sports is really, really high on him. I think he's going to redshirt. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Redshirting is fine. It's totally fine. I think people get mad at that for some reason. Like, oh, he's not ready to play right away. Football and basketball are different. Basketball, you're a 4-star recruit. You should be playing day one. There really shouldn't be much of a reason to redshirt unless you're a 4-star recruit that's going to Duke and you're going to be the 15th man on the roster because Duke has a ton of 4-star and 5-star and transfer players. Aside from that, most of the time, 4-stars are going to play their freshman season. They might not be good right away, but they're going to play. In football, not the case. Most freshmen, or true freshmen for that matter, they got a redshirt. They have to. Because size. It's a completely different ballgame. The size is just so much different between college and high school. High school to college to pro, the size, the speed, it's all completely different. And it's different in other sports, but the adjustment in football is significantly higher than in any other sport. So I think that he's going to redshirt this year. Brian Smith, Locked On recruiting expert, has said that Jamie Tremble has all the tools to be an excellent tight end, but not really for next season because he needs to hit the weight room. And he's only 210 pounds. So unless he's Oronde Gadsden right away, and he's mainly just a pass-catching tight end, he's probably going to need to put on some weight in order to really be effective at the college level. But still, very good prospect and one that I'm excited about in the years to come. Also, the good news is, because this tight end room is so elite, he's not going to have to play as much. They have Oronde Gadsden there. They have Dan Villari there. Max Mang is solid depth as a third-string tight end. So what are you looking at? Jamie Tremble's the 4th tight end on the roster? That's fine. That's fine for your true freshman season. And then next year, when you don't have Oronde Gadsden in all likelihood, that's when I expect that Jamie Tremble is going to be the starting tight end. Dan Villari probably has a similar role in 2025 than he does in 2024. Max Mang will no longer be there, but this next guy could be the 3rd-string tight end next year, and that is Elijah Washington, a 6'6", 210-pound tight end from Virginia, true freshman this year, a consensus 3-star recruit, but similar to Tremble, don't think he's going to see the field as much this season, which is not a big deal. I imagine that he uses this season to put on some more weight, get faster, get stronger, and perhaps Elijah Washington next year becomes the 3rd-string tight end. So I think it would be Jamie Tremble, and then Dan Villari, and then Elijah Washington for 2025. Way too early, 2025 roster prediction right there for you. Sounds pretty good. This tight end group could be set up for at least the next few years, especially if at least one of Jamie Tremble or Elijah Washington hits. If one of those guys hits, this tight end group is going to be pretty special for not just this year, but for 2025 and 2026 and maybe 2027 as well. Who knows? So hopefully one of those guys hits. Overall, as I have said on the podcast today, when I look at the roster on paper, it's definitely improved compared to years past. But the one position group that I look at and I say, man, that is scary. That is better than most teams in the country. It's the Syracuse football tight end room. That's the one. Yeah, they got a good quarterback room with Kyle McCord, right? Their running backs are good. You've got LaQuinn Allen and Yassine Willis and Will Nixon. That's pretty good, but not one of the best in the country. Their receiver room is also good. Linebacking unit, good. They got a lot of good. But the one unit that is super duper elite, it's the tight end group. So I am super excited to see how Jeff Nixon uses these tight ends for next season. Gadsden as the primary option. Dan Villari is the Swiss Army knife. And then those other tight ends. So you got Max Mang as the primary blocking tight end. So everyone has a role. And then Jamie Tremble and Elijah Washington. Sit back, relax, and watch the show on Saturdays because hopefully you're redshirting this year because in 2025, we're going to need you to be effective. Now, that is it for today's podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so you know right away when I'm dropping the next podcast. And guys, let me know your thoughts on Syracuse's football's tight end room. Leave a comment below. What are your expectations for Oronde Gadsden, for Dan Villari, and the other 2024 tight ends? So take care, everyone.